All right, everyone. We've turned on the recording, so please be on your best behavior. Welcome to Atheist United's fourth Sunday speaker series. We've been hosting these since 1982, and we're thrilled to have you with us. Today we have an incredible speaker, but before we do that, I want to give you a quick update on the format for how we do that, say hi to some of the people that are attending from all over the world, and go right into the meeting. So my name is Evan Clark. I'm the executive director of Atheists United. We are a nonprofit organization in Los Angeles, California. As I mentioned, we've been an independent organization since 1982 and have been hosting a speaker series for Greater Los Angeles ever since then. We're a membership organization that supports ourselves off of donation and membership from people like you. And so if you're not a member of Atheists United, we encourage you to be one. And if you don't live in LA, we still would love your support and membership. And then beyond that, I will be asking for your support through donation at the end of this meeting as well. Things are obviously different in pandemic worlds, and we have moved everything online until it is safe for us to gather again. We're hoping that sometime in 2021, but until we know, we are planning all of our events virtually. And so our new format, we don't really have music or entertainment the way we used to. It's just a little bit harder, and the sound can really get warped on a program like this, but we keep everything else about our meeting. So we start with something we call the Atheist Minute, which is an atheist story or experience or thoughts that comes from someone in our membership about their atheist identity or life. And then we move to our speaker. Our speaker goes for as much time as they would like, and then we open the floor to Q&A. For Zoom calls, we ask that you put as many questions as possible into the chat feature, and I will facilitate the questions. And then if we run out of questions that are coming in or our speaker needs to run, we kind of wrap the meeting and then just hang out for a while afterwards for anyone that wants to hang out. So we're gonna get the meeting started. But before I do that, I want to announce our speaker for next month, since I have that available. So let me share my screen.
Could you put in the chat?
Okay, hold on. There we go. Share screen, second screen. Of course, it's not working the way I want to. Let's do it this way. What can you all see right now? Can you see Sarah Posner?
Yes.
Perfect. So Sarah Posner is our speaker for next month. She's an author and investigative reporter who recently just published a book called Unholy: Why White Evangelicals Worship at the Altar of Donald Trump. You might have heard her recently on Terry Gross's NPR show. We're really excited to have her and hope you can attend. So again, fourth Sunday, and this time we added the Pacific time. So I hope you all catch that at the bottom. Okay. We will have this event on our website and our Facebook and Eventbrite probably by tomorrow morning. So look for links by tomorrow. Okay, great. So to kick off our meeting, our Atheist Minute this month is Carly Turo. She's been a member of our organization for about a year, and we'll give her the floor.
All right, hi everybody. The quick check, everybody can hear me? Cool, awesome. Hi, thanks for asking me to speak this morning. When I was asked, I kind of wasn't sure what jumped out to me about like an atheist experience for me or a religious experience. And the one thing that I kept coming back to was going to church as a kid. I was raised Catholic, not super strictly or devout, but we would go to church on Sundays. And I was never comfortable there. And when I was really little, I kind of thought, well, it's just because I don't like wearing dresses. It's a place where I have to go and get dressed up and I fidget and I don't like it. And there was a moment where I got a little older and I was actually paying attention to what was being said. And for the life of me, I cannot remember exactly the words the priest said, but the gist of it was, women, obey your husbands. And that hit me like a truck. And it suddenly clicked, like, that's why I don't feel comfortable here. It's not the dress, but this isn't a place where I'm an equal or where I'm welcomed. And I never really believed in God, so I didn't have to grapple with a big loss of faith, of like a spiritual comfort, but it did solidify this feeling of, oh, this isn't a place where I'm even welcome. And then I flash forward to when I'm a teenager, and this babysitter who I adored, and she adored me and my brothers, was getting married. And I am excited and go to her local church, and I sit down and I watch her say, I will love and obey this man who is settled. And it just really solidified for me the force that church and religion can have in people's lives, and not for good. I don't think anybody is living their best, fullest, truest self when they have to blindly obey somebody else. And I know in practice, a lot of people will say, oh, I just said it to keep my parents happy, to make the priest happy. But it's part of this institution, and part of so many institutions.
You don't know what you're doing, did you?
Oh. Yeah, so I think just to kind of quickly wrap up, for me, it just makes me think about how my feminism personally is always intertwined with my atheism. Those two things go hand in hand. And in this moment, no matter where you were socially up until this point, I think nobody can ignore what's happening politically and socially, with Black Lives Matters and LGBTQ rights being pushed back against. And it's just made me personally think a lot harder about how, for me, atheism and feminism are tied together. And that's just my experience. And, for atheists who are people of color or, have other identities that, shape their part of the world, that's also tied into atheism. So I'm excited to see, so many women speakers at AU, and I'm just kind of excited to see how we can kind of continue to embrace all atheist experiences. That's it.
Thank you, Carly. That was wonderful.
Thank you. A fun thing, if you'd like to agree with a speaker, we encourage snaps or hands, nice visual way to show your support for a speaker while we're all muted. Wonderful, thank you, Carly. Awesome, and I can cancel the spotlight. Here we go. We are up to 67 participants today, which is exciting. Again, if you're new and you just joined the meeting, go ahead and put in the chat where you're attending from. We love to see where everyone joined from. And let's hop into our presentation today. So Sam, I hope you're ready. I'm just going to introduce you now. So we're thrilled to host the National Field Director for American Atheists, Sam McGuire, and she's going to talk to us about how we can take back power from the religious right. She has a varied background in counseling, education, event planning, volunteer management. And as American Atheist National Field Director, she works with local grassroots activists, volunteers, and affiliates to help them engage on emerging local social rights issues, advocacy for state-level legislation, and ultimately helping groups like ours build thriving communities. Atheists United became an affiliate of American Atheists this year, and so we have the pleasure of working with Sam directly. Sam became involved in the secular organizing and activism following the 2012 Reason Rally, first becoming a founding member of the Southern Maryland chapter of the Washington Area Secular Humanists, and later president of the regional organization. She's volunteered for American Humanist Association, Camp Quest Chesapeake, and Secular Coalition for America. In 2016, she was volunteer coordinator for over 200 volunteers for Reason Rally, as well as helping coordinate on-site logistics. She was elected to the board of directors and is president of the Reason Rally Coalition. She's previously served as a volunteer regional director overseeing the local activism in the DC area and Maryland areas, and has earned the Atheist Activist of the Year award in 2019. So please help me in welcoming Samantha McGuire, our speaker today.
Hey, thanks for that, Evan. Let me see if I can make mine do what it's supposed to do, right? With any luck. Are
Yeah,
you
it's working.
seeing my first screen?
Well done.
Happy day.
Okay, the
There we go.
speaker is here.
All right.
All right, for those of you that have your microphones on, just a warning, I will be muting you.
So I think that he might have called in on the phone, but we are going to go ahead and get started. Uh-oh, my Microsoft is mad at me again. You guys can probably see that, can't you?
Yeah, I thought it was mine.
It's always telling me I don't have any room in the cloud. And I'm like, I know, because I don't use you. I should make it stop telling me that. So let me go to the next screen. So thank you for the introduction. We're going to be talking, like I said, I'm going to go through a lot of material pretty quickly, but that's only because I want to make sure that we have a ton of time afterwards for you to ask as many questions as you like. So if there is any time that you need me to, you know, slow down, or you've missed something, feel free to raise your hand or whatever you need to do, or just take a note and I'll go back to it when we get to Q&A. So here's our agenda for today: introductions, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the U.S. Circular Survey, which hopefully you guys have heard about. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Project Blitz, which I know the organization had a presentation on this last year, so we're just going to touch on it briefly. Then we're going to talk about legislative advocacy and the other topics that we're working on in the space, and then we're going to have a few things that you can do, activities that you can get involved in. And then, like I said, I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for Q&A. So introduction, really honestly, Evan was kind enough to read my whole bio, so we can pretty much skip over this. But generally, the reason that I like to put this slide up is because I came from the same place that many of you are right now. I just found an org, and then I started going, well, I've had to find a chapter of an organization down here in Southern Maryland because there wasn't one. So I started a group from scratch. And then we aligned ourselves with Washington Area Secular Humanists, which is a regional group very much like Atheist United. And so they have actual chapter designations, and they all are under the same umbrella 501c3. And it was a really great organization to get involved with and do some regional organizing. As mentioned, I then moved on to become involved with Reason Rally. Washington Area Secular Humanists, with both Reason Rallies, coordinated all of the volunteers because we're the biggest local group of secular folks. In 2016, that was 200 and something volunteers across 4 days of activities. So that was quite a bit. American Atheists in 2018, I joined first as an assistant state director and then moved up to Mid-Atlantic Regional Director, just mostly because I had all of those ties with WASH. And then in 2019, I was hired on as the National Field Director. So we're going to talk a little bit about the U.S. Secular Survey. Hopefully you guys have heard of this, and very quickly, there's a ton of information that we covered in the survey. And so we did this back in 2019, and it's a convenient sample. So outreach was primarily online and through partnership with many local and secular organizations. And the original goal was 5,000 to 10,000 respondents, but our groups were so great at sharing this, and everybody was so fantastic about promoting it that we had 34,000 within a few weeks, and we had to close the survey. So we probably would have got even more information, but as people who do this work know, you end up doing all of the analysis per answer. So at some point we had to shut it off. So I'm going to quickly go through this, but I want to let you know that the secularsurvey.org, you can download this entire report. I think it's 60 something pages or 80 something pages, and it has a ton of really cool information about our respondents. I highly recommend that you take a look at it, download the whole thing. It's pretty interesting. There's also a whole other webinar. I'm going to post the link in the chat at some point later. We have a whole bunch of recorded sessions that are tools that we give to our affiliates and to our state directors, and are now public as well. So you can find out more information there. So just a couple quick things to kind of talk about what California means in this survey and what kind of data came back. As you might expect, California is not particularly religious. Now, keeping in mind that this is statewide data, so of course there are pockets of non-religious folks and religious folks in all of this data, right? So this is statewide, and California came out as 11 to 25% religious, so not very. Stigma by state. So as you can imagine, if you look at these two maps, they're pretty similar, right? So any place that there's a ton of religious folks, guess what? Atheists and non-believers and humanists and agnostics are bound to experience more stigmatization. So again, California, way down on the lower left-hand side of the scatter plots, and it has a pretty low stigma rate, at least. And this is, again, it's self-selected. The respondents answered these. So it's their perception of stigma. So for the purposes of our talk today, this is the part that I really want to make known to groups like yours, that one of the things we asked people about is policy priorities and what it was that they thought that we should be focusing on legislatively, both on the national level, but also on the state level. And interestingly, a lot of folks would have expected that very bottom one, opposing religious displays on public property, to be something that American atheists and people who responded to our survey would find very important. And they actually don't find that as important as other things. So that goes back to what Carly was saying, right? If we look at this list, these are all things that atheists and agnostics and humanists care about, but they're very tied into other identities and other issues. And the reason that we focus on these things is because, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, is because we also, like Harley, believe that all of those things dovetail together, right? And so much of the opposition that we see to any progressive movements in these spaces are usually the pushback is from religious folk. And so that's why we organize around these issues. So Project Blitz, I'm just going to do a quick overview of what Project Blitz is. And because I know that most of you or some of you will have seen this presentation in full. Again, just like the last bit about the survey, there's a full presentation on Project Blitz. So if you hear these couple slides and you're like, gosh, I really want to hear more about that, guess what? We have tools. You can go watch a hour-long presentation on just this topic. So the goals of Project Blitz. Project Blitz is a Christian nationalist pushed set of legislation, and they're pushing it out across state by state. And generally they happen in 3 phases, and we'll talk a little bit about it more, but this is just sort of a quick overview of that. The phase 1 bills are usually religious heritage, and they recognize the place of Christian principles in our nation's history, and heritage is the surface reason for that. Phase 2, they usually move into religious history and freedom. And in phase 3, they talk about religious liberty protections. Generally, if you are looking to figure out if your state has a pushing of these bills, then you would look and see if there's a prayer caucus in your state. You can see that California is gray and you guys do not have one. That doesn't mean that some of this legislation won't be picked up by legislators and pushed forward as bills. They send out model legislation to a whole big network of folks, and with the hope that somebody will present it. Now, California, we're not quite as concerned about Project Blitz bills as some other things, and certainly in other states, as you can imagine. So this is a quick rundown of what that looks like. So here's some more in-depth example of those state bills that I was talking about. The Category 1 religious heritage bills, those generally are display of national motto bills and teaching of the Bible as an elective class. Category 2 are resolutions, religious history and freedom. And Category 3 is where we really start being concerned. Those are the religious liberty protection ones. So school prayer is one that you would think of as a given because of who's promoting it, right? But the broader religious exemptions like the RFRA Acts and the FADA Acts are the ones that we're more concerned about. There's also a whole host of specific religious exemptions in areas like adoption and health care. So being allowed to not adopt out to people of LGBTQ parents and families, being able to discriminate against people based on your own religious beliefs, if you are a healthcare provider. So obviously those are things that we very, very, very heavily oppose. And then religious refusals by licensed professionals as well. So doctors, therapists, social workers, folks like that. So you can see that it, you know, if it is a national motto in the school, you might see that as sort of innocuous and who really cares, but that's their whole agenda. They start with something small that most people won't necessarily oppose to kind of test the waters to see what's going to happen if they then move on to phase 2 and phase 3. So they are very dangerous, and we try to oppose them wherever we can. So one of the things we've done is created a coalition of folks. Blitzwatch.org is a great website to keep you up to date on all of these bills that we're watching across all of the states, and then also to keep you in touch with our coalition partners. So we have a whole broad range of coalition partners. We're adding to them all of the time, but you can see they come from very different places, right? So you would expect all of the national secular organizations to be in on this, but we also have SECUS, which is Sex Ed for Social Change, right? And PFLAG. And so we have other groups that are not necessarily tied to the secular movement who are also watching these bills for their own reasons, because again, that dovetailing of identities. So we're going to move into talking to legislative advocacy, and this is covering work on those Project Blitz bills, but also other types of bills. So why state legislation? State legislation, frankly, because for the last few years, getting anything past the federal level has been near impossible. We can't get anything through the Senate. Until recently, we couldn't get anything through the House. So as an organization, we decided to more focus on state legislation and things that our activists and our volunteers and our affiliate groups could involve themselves in locally. So positive policy change is actually possible at the state level, and you can avert negative policy changes, right? So although California, all those maps showed that California was pretty good on stuff, you don't want them sneaking in things without you paying attention. So we want to make sure that we keep those negative policy changes from happening. It lets lawmakers know you exist, right? We all know, because we're in the movement, that the nuns and the non-religious bloc are one of the quickest growing blocs in the country. But most of the time, lawmakers just don't know because we're so underrepresented in most states. And so if you have a relationship with your local legislators, then they start to understand, aha, maybe this is a group of people that we should be paying attention to. So building awareness and support for change and showing that your group is doing good work and attract attention, which I'm sure Evan can give a whole other hour on how to make the news if you are pushing good legislation policy. So the first thing you want to do is you want to identify your issues within your state. What happened last year? So you want to look and see what bills got introduced and didn't pass is one of the things that you definitely want to be looking at. And then you want to look at your current political context, right? So one of our really great teams is in Virginia. In Virginia, up until real recently, there wasn't a chance that we were going to be able to get anything passed because it just wasn't going to. So we were working on things like changing their sex ed laws and changing their medical aid and dying laws, but we kind of knew they wouldn't go anywhere. And that has changed because now they flipped everything blue, 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 right? So now there's things that got pushed through and worked on last year that were on hold for a decade. So paying attention to what's going on currently. Obviously, what are your members most concerned about? Again, going back to those policy priorities that we asked on the survey, you want to do a similar survey of your local group. Maybe you're really interested in making sure that there's science-based, medically accurate sex ed in the schools. And maybe that's something that somebody would get very excited about and want to kind of spearhead. You guys already have medical aid and dying, but that's one that people work on across the country as well. There's a whole host of issues. We've worked on conversion therapy bans. We've worked on a bunch of different things. So are you part of coalition efforts? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. You should know, and I know that Evan has talked about this as well in different contexts, but you should know the groups that are occupying the same space as you. You should get to know your ACLU, your Planned Parenthood, your groups that are going to be working on the same issues as you and be on the same side of them. And then of course you should know the current state law. So if you're advocating to change the law, you should know what it is you're trying to change. So American Atheists, these are our policy priorities, and you're going to see that they're very, very broad. As I said, lots of our groups are working on lots of different things. But the overarching piece of that is we want them to prevent discrimination, harassment, and coercion against atheists and non-believers. We want to limit the harm that religion can cause to third parties, especially children. And we want to oppose special privileges based on religious belief. So again, our main core mission, of course, is protecting that wall of separation between religion and government. So why are some of these things atheist issues, right? And we get pushback on this from time to time from some of our older members who don't quite understand why we're taking a stance on things like abortion rights and women's health and things like that, or medical aid in dying, or sex ed. And the issue is, like I said before, most of those groups are getting pushback from religious organizations. So here's some examples of bills that we're working on. The positive ones are the ones that we are supporting when they're introduced. So those would be ones that might be more in California, and the negative ones are the ones we're opposing. So limits on religious exemptions, ending conversion therapy, repealing faith healing laws, ending child marriage, which surprisingly, there's so many places to work on that. Prohibiting FGM, comprehensive sex ed, and medical aid in dying. And the ones that we're opposing, obviously, are religious exemptions, medical religious refusals, religious display laws, anti-reproductive access, Bible classes, special privileges, and then school-related things like vouchers and prayer. So a really great place, if you haven't seen this before, again, I'm trying to throw a bunch of resources at you that you can use as a group. Every year we do a State of the Secular States report. This is our 2019 one. We just finished collecting all the data for 2020, so it should be coming out pretty shortly. We do a scorecard for each state. California, you can see, it has a lot of blue laws, but there's still red in there as well. So when you're looking at the blue are those positive laws, and if they're filled in, that means that you guys have a law for that. So if you are in California, you see that there's lots of filled in blue circles. If you are looking at red circles, those ones are the negative laws that we would oppose. And you can see that there's ones that are red and filled in as well. So those are the ones that we would look at when we're doing legislative activity and maybe figure out a way to oppose or change that law. And again, that's at atheist.org states. You can download the entire report. I think that one's like 60 something pages, and there's a scorecard, and then there's also nationwide maps of different issue and priorities that we're watching at a national level. All right, do the things. This is my favorite part. That's great, Sam. Thanks for all that information. What are we supposed to do with it? Get out there, pick a thing, go do it, anything. So one of the things that came from the survey is local group engagement. This is my favorite part of the entire report, of course. I'm the National Field Director, so my job is to work with all of the groups. So this is the part that I care about. Local group engagement, and you can see that most people participated in or were interested in social opportunities, right? So back before pandemic, most people would be meeting up in pubs and having a beer and getting together and bitching about religion. And most groups do that all the time, and that may or may not be all that they do. Some groups also do debates or lectures, and you know, that's most, you can see that's the second most likely thing for people to do. Then some folks have volunteer opportunities, community service type opportunities, and then advocacy opportunities. So that's what we're talking about here, is the advocacy portion of it. There's a big want for resources with people with children. Unfortunately, American Atheists, our affiliates also really always give us feedback that that's something they want. There are some great groups that do that, but it's hard to tap into it locally sometimes. So doing the things, what we just talked about were those 4 things. Uh-oh, there they are. Okay, so activism is our A of our ACEs. Activism is improving policies in your school district, town, city, state, nation by doing all of the things that we've talked about before, including also litigation and even running for office. Education are those educational, like we're doing right now, right? You invite a speaker in, they talk to you about a topic. Hopefully you leave there much more informed on whatever the issue is that they came in to speak about. Oop, those ones want to go together. Okay, so community is creating communities, and that's what we think of as sort of the social components, right? We're going to have cookouts, and we're going to have pub nights, and we're going to have whatever it is that we're going to do, our local picnic that we do once a year, maybe our human light celebration, things like that. And then service is that volunteering effort of getting out there and doing good in your community and making sure that people know that you are atheists and humanists as you do those good things. That's where I think oftentimes we miss the boat there. Go out and do good things and make sure that people who are receiving your services or that you are engaging in community service with know that you are atheists or humanists. So as I said before, usually groups are doing one of these things or two of these things, maybe. A really, really well-functioning group has all of these things and they work together, right? So I might have an education night and I might have somebody come in and talk about science-based sex ed. I might have Jennifer Driver come in and talk from CECUS, or maybe I would play the webinar that American Atheists put on, have you guys all watch it. And then, so that would be that educational piece of it, right? And then you would tie in a community service piece of it and make it related. So you would maybe go and work at the women's shelter or the local LGBTQ center, start a drive for supplies of things that people need, something like that for that service part of it. And then you would then go legislate on the activism side of it. You would then go try to get either policy put in your school board for science-based medically accurate sex ed, or even at the state level. And then of course you would get together at the end of that, have drinks, talk all about how you did, and share your success stories, right? All right, so other things that you can do, and most of these tie back again to that legislative piece, because that is really how we can affect change at this point at the state level. So testifying at hearings, if you are an affiliated American Atheist or you are one of our volunteer state directors, Allison, who's in that top left picture, is our Vice President of Legal and Policy. Her team writes the testimony for you. You get somebody to do your homework. It's fantastic. I love it. I don't even have to write anything. So that's me in the bottom there. I'm testifying for medically and dying in Maryland. There's, we're sitting around waiting. So that's the other piece of this, is that when you're sitting around waiting to testify at a hearing, you are sitting around with the local representatives from ACLU, from local advocacy groups, from local Together We Wills and Indivisibles and other people who are supporting this bill. And in this case, Maryland, this is a very divisive topic. And so it's 8 hours of waiting for my 3 minutes to speak, but I use that 8 hours to make those connections. So it's a really good way to get to know folks in your community. Lobby days. So we can help you put together lobby days. These are Oklahoma on the top left, Arizona at the bottom, and Iowa on the right. And they were lobbying on various issues and they do a great job. I know that California used to have a lobby day, and it's something that Evan and I have talked about potentially putting back together to be able to do. Of course, it's difficult, right? You are far away from Sacramento where you guys are. So that doesn't mean you can't do anything because you can't go to Sacramento. A lot of the times what we encourage people to do is make sure that you make connections with your lawmakers ahead of time and in their home district offices. So you want to make sure that if you have an issue in particular that you want to lobby on or talk about or go and advocate for, that you already know your legislator when it comes time for them to vote. The day before the vote is not the time to make that connection, right? You want to be able to talk to them in their district office, be able to bring up the issues that are important to you and make that personal connection ahead of time. So working in coalition, so medical aid and dying, you saw me in that picture. This is Larry, he's our Virginia State Director. They had a lobby day for compassion and choices in Virginia last year. Like I said, we're trying to move some bills that we didn't move before in that state. Then we have Equality Florida. We have Devin as our Assistant State Director. She's in the middle of that picture. And then this is a Planned Parenthood rally in Cincinnati. And Jen Scott, who is on our board, is not speaking, but is right behind. And you can see our fantastic signs, keep your theocracy off my democracy, and this is not a church. So we show up with signs, and before you know it, you're the one atheist at the group and you have 20 signs, and then all of a sudden you have 20 people holding your sign, and it looks like you've really showed up with a whole bunch of people. Another pro tip. So one of the other things we do is local group coordination. So back to those Project Blitz bills, we had a motto display bill pass in Kentucky. we couldn't stop it. We expected it to pass. So then once it did, and it was August and kids were going back to school, we got with all of our local groups and all of our assistant state directors and state director in Kentucky, and we made sure that we had some press response to the motto. So the one on the left is Brittany Pike. She's the wife of Johnny Pike, who is our Kentucky state director. And that's the motto display in their school was this slightly enlarged dollar bill. And she posted about it on Facebook and it went viral, picked up across the country. And so we got to say, you know, and you see right there, she hashtagged American Atheists and In God We Trust. And then we picked up some other press from other stations. That's Dietrich, he's our Louisville assistant state director, and he was on local media there. And so it got a lot of press, even though we weren't allowed to, we weren't able to stop the bill. We raised awareness about why it was problematic to folks who are non-religious and non-believers, or also if they believe something else other than Christianity. So here's another to-do. We have a state legislative tracker. Right now it's between sessions for most states, so there'll be a lot of places that it doesn't look like we're tracking anything because we're out of session. That's probably even more so the case right now because so many sessions ended early because of the pandemic. So if you go to this website, then you can see what we are tracking. You can also sign up so it will send you alerts when bills move in your state. And then you can sign up for our action alerts at atheist.org/sign-up. And for those ones, those are all of the action alerts that we send out. A lot of them are state-based. That's why we ask for your information so we know that we're sending action alerts to the right folks. A bunch of them are national as well. So things like opposing the Payroll Protection Act funds going to churches, things like Betsy DeVos's stances on education. We have national alerts as well. So please go there and sign up. Another initiative is Secular America Votes. We're partnering with a bunch of the national orgs, and actually Secular Student Alliance is sort of running point on it this year. Secular America Votes, they have a bunch of resources. We've had to pivot like everybody else who's involved in Get Out the Vote initiatives. We were going to be doing tons of in-person voter registration events with our groups, and obviously we can't do that now. So we've pivoted to making sure that we're doing online registration, getting the word out there, using hashtag campaigns. It's hashtag Secular America Votes, hashtag Atheist Voter, and making sure that we let our groups know, particularly in the states where there's going to be challenges about how to register to vote, how to do the absentee ballot, what it is that you need to do. So just trying to make sure that we get the word out there, because if you really want to know how we affect change, you vote. That's how you do it. Get as many people as we can to vote. Atheist Engage is another initiative that we've had going on social media. It was a little bit more in the past because we have some state senators who wanted to erase our comments from their public Facebook pages, and we're actually engaged in a lawsuit with them right now. But if you are talking or tweeting at your elected officials, please follow this little bit of advice, right? So you want to stay focused on the issue. You want to make sure that you're identifying as an atheist, a humanist, whatever your particular word is. You want to be respectful, because then they don't have grounds to ban you. And if they do ban you or block you, let us know and take a screenshot and then email it to me, and we'll see if we can help you out. And questions. Gosh, that was a lot of information. I'll have to send you an email with all of those links.
That was great. Actually, Christine's been doing a great job of throwing some of the links in the chat as you were talking.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you.
That was wonderful. That's so exciting. I actually took the photo of the Phoenix group on their lobby day. That was fun to see.
Yeah, they really know what they're doing there.
Yeah.
I posted, I think, about 3 links that you mentioned, but I didn't catch them all. So,
Okay. I'll catch them.
So we'll hop into questions in a second. So to think about structures and movement building, I'm just going to open with kind of a question of maybe Arizona is a good example of like what the dream is for institutional growth of our movement, where you can actually hire a state level lobbyist or have multiple organizations in tight coordination for legal strategies or lobbying strategies. You know, if you kind of assess the country right now, who's doing really well and what does it look like and what is it going to look like over the next few years if we were to really invest better in this type of engagement and change, and coordinate with campaigns that American Atheists are doing, how do you envision the movement essentially growing in power and structure?
Yeah, so Arizona is doing a really great job, and one of the things that they've done really well is engage all of the local groups across their state within their Secular Coalition of Arizona group, right? So what we try to do also at American Atheists is build teams. I mentioned Florida, and I mentioned Virginia, and I mentioned Kentucky. So any place that is building a team that has contacts with all of the local groups, and then those local groups are making contacts outside of their groups, are doing well. So Arizona is doing extremely well in the fact that they also then managed to get a bunch of non-believers elected, right? As you all know. So that's the outcome we would love to see in more states, where there's local groups that are really active, they're engaging with each other, they're picking a priority, they're working on that priority for that year, and then people are stepping forward and running for office. And if we can do that in more states, then obviously we shift that balance to make our representatives look a little bit more like the actual general American population does, right? We all know that we're extremely underrepresented in our elected officials. Probably we're not actually, but at least for people who are willing to come out and say that they're atheists or humanists, we're doing a great job. Center for Free Thought Equality does a great job of tracking those candidates and trying to make sure that they get the word out so that we know to support them. But really working in coalition, really working together with everybody. So in terms of American Atheists, good teams that are working together really well are Virginia, which I mentioned. We have a state director there, Larry, and he has, I think there's 7 assistant state directors who are in different areas of the state, and they have ties to their local secular community. So if there's something that we're working on, like sex ed, for instance, they've been working on there, they can all get together and coordinate, okay, well, I talked to my school board and this is what happened. I had this thing and that's what happened, and coordinate with each other. Then they can coordinate with us, and then we can help them coordinate with groups like SECUS and Planned Parenthood to get them the educational resources they need, and you know, potential curriculum and things like that. And also to strategize, right? We can't pretend to be the expert in all of these things. We had, or did have, Tom Quash on the line, and he's the comms person for Compassion and Choices, if it's the same Tom Quash, which I think it is. And so we can't pretend that we're the expert on how to strategize on medical aid and dying law, right? But what we can do is, at a national level, I can talk to their staff and figure out, okay, here are the states we're going to prioritize in. Here are the states that we're seeing pushback from healthcare organizations that are trying to make it so it's harder to implement the law. Which states do we then also have grassroots folks and really strong secular communities, and let them be the expert on that, and not just sort of kind of try to figure it out on our own, right? Which I think that we've kind of done in the past, and we're definitely trying to move away from.
Right. And not, like, I know it's never just one thing, but what do you think are some of the biggest barriers for some of our groups getting to that level of engagement or power right now? Like, is it money? Is it volunteers? Is it coordination? Again, I know it's not one, but you know, do you have one that kind of really rushes to the top?
Yeah, it's all those things.
Okay.
It is all those things. But I would say mostly it's finding an issue that gets you all excited to at least the first time, right? Because then if you experience some success in that, so, you know, I can go back to my own story. So I started the group in 2013, and I tell people all the time that I didn't really become an activist, even though I was leader of a group and I was the president of Washington and all of that stuff. I really wasn't an activist until there was a sex ed class that the public library wanted to put on in the, you know, they were bringing in this speaker from outside, and she was well-educated and certified to do sex ed, and she wanted to do a class for teens to give them a space to come into the library and ask any question of her, because our sex ed is in Maryland. It's okay. It's all right in our county, right? It's not terrible, but it's not great. And so her idea was, I'm going to give these teens a safe space to ask any question they want and get an answer. And the religious conservatives in our county, I'm in Maryland, but I'm in Southern Maryland in St. Mary's County, which is all the way south on the other side of the river from Virginia. And it is the South. It just is. It's very conservative. It's very Republican. It's very Christian. It's very white. We have a Navy base that lends some diversity to the community, but that's about it. And so the religious conservatives in the area went crazy. The Catholic Church went nuts, and they started writing into the county commissioners and to the board of library trustees and trying to get the library director fired and all of this stuff. And they ended up firing it and ended up canceling the class under this pressure. And I heard about it and I was mad, because the main reason they wanted to cancel it was because we don't want to talk about sex with teens, but also because the instructor was a lesbian, and they were real mad about it. And so I said, that's bullshit. And I booked a room and we had the class. And because of that, we ended up all in the paper, because it was a huge controversy for months in our little tiny county, right? We ended up all in the paper. All of the county commissioners now know who I am. I was on the local radio station, talk radio in the morning, right? They're gonna protest us. They had a counter event where they brought in a chastity specialist to come and do a class for teens. Yeah. So, I mean, but I would have never, if you'd asked me the year before, hey, what's the issue that's going to really just galvanize your group and get you guys going, I wouldn't have been able to say sex ed. Yeah, we're going to support sex ed, obviously, like that's an issue. But it was the cancellation and the way that it happened and all of the pressure that was put on the library to go back on what they were trying to do that we thought was a good thing, that really galvanized everybody. So, and then that brought us more volunteers, more members, more money, right? More press, because people heard about us and saw, they were, wow, an atheist group in St. Mary's County, never even knew you existed, right? So.
Great. Thank you. One of the questions that came in was about the PPP loan program and how the Catholic Church has brought in unbelievable amounts of money from that. And they were asking about what are ways that we can challenge that or work on that issue.
Yeah. So internally, we have people who are going through all of that data. It is a ton of data. Our estimates on our press releases we put out and the information we put out are way low, and we know that just because it was actually literally terrible data. The way they released the data is awful. So what we're asking people to do at a local level, our volunteer state directors and our affiliate people are fine, because we would love to, but we can't combat the sheer number of churches that got money. So what we're trying to do is connect churches that are terrible in some other way, right? So if they have a history of fraud and abuse, if they have their deacon is elected official and they then took money, right? So Betsy DeVos's church in Michigan took money, because of course it did. The church that gave, that just had the camps that all the kids got COVID because they don't want to listen to COVID restrictions. Guess what? They took money, right? So we're trying to connect those dots of all of that money that is paid for by taxpayers, going to a religious organization, which it shouldn't anyways, with no transparency. We have no idea where the money has gone to, because they don't have to file a 990 because they're a church. And then connecting them to some crappy behavior that we can point to and say, look, you shouldn't be giving money to this church for these reasons, but also look at what they did. That's terrible behavior. So that's sort of what we've been trying to do on a national level. And then if we find those connections, we're trying to get those into local papers, right? Into local op-eds, get a local reporter to pay attention to it. So again, you do a whole separate thing on cultivating those relationships with your editors of your local papers and people that are local reporters. That's another thing that's super valuable for groups.
Just a reminder for everyone, please put your questions in the chat feature right now, and we'll ask them so that we can keep everything coordinated and not lose us in the 10 microphone problem. We had a question about the good news clubs, and I think it'd be good if you can kind of explain what those are and how our community responds to them.
Yeah, so Good News Clubs are church groups that come in and run after-school programs, and they are basically proselytizing at the schools. We can't do much about them other than make sure that their policies are fair to other groups, so that if a student wants to start an SSA or a Secular Student Alliance, or if another group wants to come in and start, you know, for a while there was a Satanic Temple put out After School Satan, and they had really cute books and a whole sort of curriculum of things that you could do with the kids. So we really can't do much unless, you know, an After School Satan wants to start up and they don't let them. Then we have grounds to try to shut the whole thing down. And honestly, there's some schools that will do that. So instead of allowing a non-religious or a satanic group to come in, they will just make it so that there can't be any religious groups.
Got it. But because if I understand the law correctly, we can also create our own after-school programs, which the Satanists and some atheist communities have done.
Yep, absolutely. So again, we get a lot of questions about things like the flyers that come home too. If you have elementary kids, right, they come home with a folder and that has a bunch of flyers, and sometimes there'll be a church-sponsored group thing in there. If they're following their own policies, so that's the first thing, is to figure out what their policy is to send a flyer home like that. If they're following their own policies, and then you as a local group want to have a fall Follies fair and send a flyer home with your kid, with all the kids from the school, they have to follow that same policy. So again, sometimes they will, sometimes they'll send it home if you point out the policy. Sometimes they'll just say, okay, fine, no church groups then either. So either way, we're happy with that outcome, honestly.
Right. There was a question about, do you think the current climate in our country, particularly with racial injustice protesting and attention, will create an opportunity for more, quote, younger generation to become more involved with challenging the religious right and getting involved in things like our ACES programs?
Yeah, I mean, the demographics are there, right? I mean, if you look at the PRI research and the Pew research, it shows that younger people are just overwhelmingly moving in that direction of becoming less religious, of not going to church as often, and then also holding more progressive views on things like equality. So the demographics are there. I am not a patient person, so I would like to try to speed along that process wherever I can and make sure that we are engaging on the issues that the community finds important.
I'm trying to figure out how to engage this question with nuance, but essentially the way the questioner asked it was, are conservative atheists hopeless? But I think the deeper question is how do we engage with people that are struggling with the values and issues or positions that organizations like Atheists United or American Atheists are taking on these, because they're often running in conflict to the conservative ideas some atheists identify with.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as an organization, again, everything in our mission comes back to the separation of religion and government is our main thrust of our mission, right? And so a lot of the issues that people are like, well, that's not an atheist issue, why are you engaging on it, are ones that we see as atheist issues, because if you took religion out of the equation, right? So let's pick an issue. Let's pick women's right to choose. Yeah, women's right to choose. So if you took religion out of that equation, and people were just allowed to access the healthcare, and the decision was between them and their doctor and maybe their loved ones, and you took people opposing these things because of their ideas of what embryos are or aren't, and whether or not there's a soul or there isn't, then that issue goes away, right? Because then people are allowed to just make their own choices for what is best for them. And same thing with LGBTQ rights, right? So if you took people's religious exemptions, criticisms and opposition out of that equation, then you would be looking at a much different landscape. in a lot of cases. So it's not that we don't want to engage with conservative atheists, it's that I think that they see the issues that we should be engaging on as only 10 commandments on the courthouse lawn and only the in God we trust thing in the courtroom, right? But our data from our survey shows differently. Our data from our survey says these are the issues that our 34,000 people wanted to engage on. And so that's how we're driving what we're doing, because we have data that says that that's what people are interested in engaging on.
Right. We had a question about, do you coordinate with other, I think they mean secular in the more broad sense than secular community sense, citizen climate lobby organizations and other groups like that that are lobbying for carbon-free or dividend work? Do you have recommendations for connecting with such groups?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hyper-local thing, right? So you would know which groups are local to you that are working in that space. And again, with all of these things, I often recommend, for me in Maryland, it's been the conversion therapy ban and medical aid and dying that have been the two issues that I've gone and worked in coalition a lot on. And those orgs there's some of them are national and some of them are local. And so find out what they're doing. Find out if they're holding a lobby day, find out if they're having a town hall with an elected official that you can engage in and see what they're doing. Again, we don't want to pretend that we're the experts in all of these fields, right? We want to leave the sort of expert work to the people who are in that space and are doing it. So I do think that you're going to see more stuff coming from us on climate issues. It's been one of the ones that's been hard for us to engage on because it's hard to make it fall into that category of religion and government, but you see more and more people who their answer for why we don't have to worry about climate change is God. And he made this planet, so therefore we can't kill it, right? So I have a feeling that's one we're going to be moving more into.
We had a question about how we get involved with or support down ballot candidates, and like where you find information on that and how you get involved.
Yeah, so state level, so school boards and things like that. I mean, part of this is just being informed consumer, right? Just like anything else. If you've got to go and find those people, find their web pages, find their social media, and see what they're saying and figure out who they are as people. And a lot of those positions, right, you want to look at the issues of where they stand on things and then make your decisions based on that. So there's not, unfortunately, so our action alert system will tell you down to a certain level, but it doesn't get as granular as like school boards and city councils and things like that. There are other trackers that do that, but you should be able to go to your local board of elections and find out who your elected officials are right now and then also who is running for those.
Yeah, and I really want to encourage everyone to work with their local secular groups
This
on
Atheist Votes is on my shirt.
Yeah, and wear your t-shirts. But yeah, you have local organizations and they're in the best position to do it. While we love Sam, ultimately she's going to call someone like me to solve like an LA issue. So
yeah,
work with the
we
leadership.
need more volunteers. You know, if any of you are on this call are like, hey, gosh, this all sounds super, super exciting, and you live in a city and you want to get more involved, then the best way to do that is, volunteer, and I'll put you to work. I'm a mostly kindly boss. But.
We had a question that was designed for everyone, which is, are you registered to vote and are you planning to vote? But I want to kind of let you speak about maybe Secular America Votes or any other voter registration program.
Yeah, so Secular America Votes is, if you go to secularamerica.votes.org, there's a couple resources there. You can check and make sure that you are registered. And then there's also links for all of the states that allow registering online, which is not all of the states. That you can go ahead and follow those links and get registered, but it will also tell you what the rules are for registering. I highly, highly, highly encourage everybody to register, to drag your family and friends to register, to post on Facebook that you are registered, to make sure that everyone knows that you are going to go vote in this next election. And again, local elections matter, right? So if we look back to what happened with the Tea Party, how did they come to be in power? They started at school boards. They started at, you know, these local elections that maybe 2 votes made a difference, and people just don't show up to those. So show up, be aware, know who your candidates are, and make sure that they align with your values, whatever they are, and then vote.
Can you talk quickly about affiliation with American Atheists and what benefits that has and how that can connect you to national campaigns?
Yep, so if you affiliate, you just go to atheist.org affiliates. There's a form to fill out that gives us, you know, all of your links and contact information for 2 people in case your website goes down and I need to find you. And then, so it's a pretty low bar for affiliation. Really, we just check and make sure you're an actual group. You actually meet online or in person. You're not like a podcast or something like that. And we're really trying to gear that towards community-based groups. Once you're an affiliate, then you get access to a bunch of tools and resources. We have a bunch of toolkits on various issues. We have all of the webinars, which, like I said, are now public facing as well. That's atheist.org/webinars. And then we also send out, if you tell me that you're tabling at a thing, let's say you're going to be at a pride or you're going to a rally, I will send you all of those great signs and stickers and things like that. But you also get access to or prioritized access to our staff, right? So if you have a question about how to become a nonprofit, what you should do with your bylaws, we have Allison for that. If you have an issue with something that you think might be a violation legally, then we have Jeff Blackwell as our litigation counselor. And then if you have something that you're trying to get some media eyes on and you want some feedback on writing op-eds or getting those into maybe national or at least local papers, then you have access to Tom, who is our comms guy. And so it's really, we have a good team of folks who really all know what they're doing. And it's if you're an affiliate, again, that bar is real low. Fill out the form and then you can access these things. And it also gives you a spot on our map. So if someone Googles atheist, because that's usually the first word they Google when they're questioning their faith and they're looking for a group, they'll Google atheist, they'll find our map, and then they'll find your group. And we don't care if atheist is in the name. By the way, I get that question a lot. You can be called freethinkers, humanists. You can be associated with AHA. You can be a chapter of AHA. That used to be a thing. It's not a thing anymore. So feel free to affiliate.
Thank you. And I do want to encourage the more of us that can be working together and be in partnership with these national organizations, even regionally. I'm thinking of like the Bay Area and San Diego here in California. We all can then work together because we have national partners we can coordinate with together, and we're all on the same page about language and legislation. There was a fun question about how do we respond to checkout clerks that say have a blessed day. That's less advocacy focused.
Well, right now, are they wearing a mask or not wearing a mask? Because that's actually what I care about. You know, I mean, people ask us that all the time. I just don't usually respond to things like that unless I'm wearing an atheist shirt and it seems to be malicious in some way. But if they're just really well-wishing me, I don't tend to respond. That's not my thing.
There was a question about the Pledge of Allegiance, and I kind of want to reform the question about like how that fits into priority levels for organizations like American Atheist. You know, a lot of the symbolic issues were what got, I don't want to just call them completely symbolic, but the symbolism of like in God we trust and our money they definitely galvanized our community for a number of years, and will always to some extent do that. But I'm curious about looking at where we are today in this moment and with the secular survey data. How high a priority is it, and what does it look like to engage with that issue?
Yeah, so I mean, the real issue is, yes, on the survey, it doesn't seem particularly important to people. Things are higher on their list of things they would like us to see us do. Yes, we don't like that In God We Trust is on the money, and we don't like that God is in the pledge. But honestly, it's, have you seen the SCOTUS right now? Like we're very selective about cases that we take and try to push forward, because, and we coordinate with the other national organizations on this, because we don't want to set bad precedent, right? So we'd rather wait and bide our time, even though it might be quite a while, on cases that are good in order to push those issues forward. And so we will get people who contact us about various things, and the answer has to be, we can't focus on that right now. Not because we don't want to, not because it's not important, not because we think it should be that way, but just because the timing isn't right, and we know we're going to lose, and we don't want to lose.
Can you speak a little bit longer about that? I know I've spent time talking to like the lawyers in our movement and have a good sense of this, but I don't know that everyone else has really, like all of our local groups have accepted the situation and like where we can play offense and where we have to play defense. And so can you speak to, you know, my understanding is local secular communities are the best offensive opportunity we have in some ways, but can you flesh that larger idea about offense and defense for the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of it is contingent on the elections in 2020, right? And what happens there. Like I said earlier in the presentation, we did used to have a pretty robust sort of offensive on trying to get national legislation passed at a national level. And then we had to step back from that and focus more on states. And, you know, again, I'm not the most patient of people. And so it's hard for me to tell people to wait, since I'm not a person that likes to wait. But in some cases, it makes sense. And so, again, with, you know, the court being the way it is, and all of the federal seats that were filled below the Supreme Court with this administration's appointees, we really don't see our legal stuff going in ways that we want it to go. So we'll very selectively take a case. You're more than welcome to float them by us. We talk about what we can do or what we can't do. And then there is always the local advocacy piece of that. Just because we're not willing to sue on an issue doesn't mean we don't want it to be in the paper to raise awareness. Going back to that Kentucky bill that passed, and we knew it was going to pass, and there was no way for us not to get it to pass, we at least got local eyes on our perspective and why maybe it wasn't a good idea to have laws like that. And how would people feel like, you know, if it was in Allah we trust or something like that. And so we were able to raise awareness even in places that we can't do anything legally or legislatively. And so that's where those local community groups come in, having those connections with local media and making sure that we have a person out there who's willing to be open in public as an atheist or a humanist disputing these things. Does that answer that?
Yep. No, thank you. If you could challenge everyone on this call to do something, what would it be?
Do the things. So it's my unofficial official motto. And it doesn't matter what it is. Pick a thing, anything that gets you excited and motivates your group. It can be collecting blankets for dogs at the shelter. It can be collecting cans for people for the food bank. It can be showing up en masse to a lobby day. But the first thing is to get out in the community as atheists, as humanists, wearing your atheist flag, your humanist flag, and let people know that you are here, that you exist, and that you're like not a baby eater, and you probably have some good values, and you probably want to see those values put into action, right? So getting out there and just being visible is very important, and it doesn't matter which particular thing. It can be community service, it can be education, it can be advocacy, it can be activism. You could be at a rally, you could be testifying, you'd be at lobby day. You know, wear your atheist shirt wherever you go and just get out there.
Great. If there's any more questions, please put them in the chat. We're probably going to go about another 5 minutes. Let's see. I don't think I caught all of them. Great. I guess I want to ask a question about like how you feel about momentum. I know we just talked about offense and defense, but how you feel about momentum of the secular community. I know for the past few years, I've heard many leaders talk about they've been struggling to maintain membership, or like the age demographics have gotten so out of whack in their community, they're worried about their future. or it just seems like, whether it be generational or not, there's like a split over issues, right? There's sometimes, I call them like traditional atheist organizers that get very focused on, let's say, the issues we were talking about or the legislation we were talking about in the 80s and 90s. And we have a lot of like Gen Z now that are growing up with Black Lives Matter, and you know, they have always grown up in a country and economy at war and struggling, and it feels like two different worlds sometimes. Like, do you feel like there's momentum? Where do you think that momentum is? What does it look like? Yeah, is it everywhere? You know, and I know we have a very diverse movement, from, you know, ethical culture and all the changes they've gone through, to like atheist organizations with atheists in the name, to pop-ups like Sunday Assembly that kind of came on the scene in the past 8 years. So very broad question, but like, how do you feel about the momentum of, let's call it, secular organizing?
So I am optimistic, or I wouldn't be where I am, right? So I think that what I find most valuable, or what's going on in the Atheist Secular Humanist movement, is this coalition building that's happening across the country, both locally and nationally. I kind of alluded to, right, used to not be able to be a chapter of CFI and also associated with AHA, because there was like this weird infighting stuff. And we see more and more and more of that going away. All of the national leaders are really trying to give resources to the groups in ways that make sense, and making sure that we're building these strong communities that can get out there and work on whatever our issues are in that community. At a local level, we see that happening state by state as well. And I think that that is also super valuable. There used to be, you know, just sort of like this national organizing, and then groups were on their own. Like, you started your little meetup and you didn't ever talk to the meetup next door, right? And so I think that there's a huge value in organizing regionally or by state. So you know what's going on. You can all be on the same page. You can be working on issues together. Because, you know, let's face it, if you have 6 affiliate groups and they're each working on a separate issue during a legislative session, that's just not as impactful as if everybody picks one issue and everybody's showing up on that one issue for that year. And that doesn't mean we won't, like, you know, offer some testimony on whatever, but if we're organizing and really trying to be cohesive on one issue one year, get it passed or get it opposed or whatever it is that we're doing, and then next year we can pick another issue. And try to advance that forward. And I think that that's really a big difference. I feel like the groups all talking to each other, talking to the nationals, is where it's at. I feel like if we can create these regional things, like you guys had your retreat, and some other places have done that. We have WASH in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, Florida working all together. It's a huge state. We're going to be better for it, and we're going to be more able to make the changes we want, build the communities we want, and get done what we want to get done.
I just found 2 questions that I missed. One was, do you know anyone trying to include skeptical thinking or critical thinking into public schools, and how we can engage with that? Very specific.
Yeah, so like a critical thinking class. Man, wouldn't that be nice? Let's make that required in all of the classes. Again, so that's knowing your local community, knowing how topics are introduced in your school board, getting to know your school board members, getting to know your person who's in charge of instructional curriculum, and then engaging with them on those issues. I don't know of anybody doing that. CFI would probably be a better organization to ask. They have that more skeptic science-based following, and so they might have a better answer on that.
And Paul Rinser asked that question. Please reach out to me. We've been engaging with the formerly Young Thinkers program and trying to see if that's something we could relaunch in Southern California. And we've gotten in touch with Camp Quest, and they just hired a new staff member that is designing a new day camp program, which they're hoping they can convert to an after-school program. So we're hoping by 2021 there is a curriculum at least that can kind of be a curriculum in a box for most of our secular groups if we do want to engage in at least after school programs. I think it's a much deeper question about the full public school program.
Yeah.
And then there was another question about how their group had been getting involved in some local issues, but what strategies was the question. Like they've tried to get involved, but they're curious about what strategies can make them most effective or have a larger impact.
So, I mean, it depends on how hyper local you're talking. At the state level, you're going to have state level organizations that are working on stuff, and you can figure out what that is. Again, what I was talking about before about knowing what's been worked on in the past, being aware of your environment at a state level of what's going on in politics. If you're talking about hyper local, like city, county level, same thing really actually applies, right? So locally, you're going to want to know what issues engage your group, what things they're excited about. Is it sex ed? Is it passing a fairness ordinance if you're a bigger city or even a smaller city? We have a bunch of groups that have worked on that in coalition. And then figuring out the groups that are taking point on that and making sure that you are in touch with those leaders of those groups. You don't want to come in and take over a space, right? The atheists, we're here, we're going to be doing all the things. We want to show up and work with folks. I also strongly recommend people get engaged with other groups that align with your values or your group's values. So that could be climate change groups. It could be reproductive rights groups. It could be more general, like an indivisible type group. It could be as simple as a Facebook group of who knows what's going on locally. And making sure that you are plugged into those things. Because again, I wouldn't have known that sex ed class got canceled, and I wouldn't have known to be mad about it if I weren't part of the local progressive group that is not an atheist group and people were talking about it. And so, building those coalitions with folks that are like-minded to your group members. And again, I know we had the question earlier about conservative atheists. That still holds true. So if there's things that are issues that you find important and you're a conservative atheist, then find the groups that are doing that work as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Christine?
There's a question I wanted to address. Looks like there's someone from NCSC, which is the National Center for Science Education, who's interested in partnering with atheists. I'm not sure if that's Larry Schwartz, that's the question. So maybe we can get in touch with each other later after this call.
Feel free to drop my email in the chat. It's smcguire, McGuire @atheist.org. Anybody on the call, you want to email me for any particular reason. You can also find me on Twitter at Sam J. McGuire. And that's another way to get in touch with me if you're a Twitter person. I'm trying to become a Twitter person. Tom yelled at me until I got on Twitter, so now I'm on Twitter.
It's hard, I know. I am going to wrap the presentation section of the meeting. If everyone can give kind of your virtual round of applause to Sam. Thank you again for everything that you shared with us today. For those of you that are not members of Atheists United, I really want to encourage you to become a member. We are a membership organized and structured organization. You get to vote for our board of directors. You get to run for our board of directors. And ultimately you help support the work we do. We it's only $45 a year for a membership in our organization. We of course would love your support beyond that. Normally that would give you access to all of our in-person meetings and a few other programs, and those that aren't members would be charged to get access to those meetings. We've obviously moved everything online and had to kind of reformat, restructure everything. And so we've moved to, that these meetings are for our membership, and then we have a suggested donation for everyone that is not a member of the organization, but we obviously have most of the world signing in for our meetings now. But I don't want to forget that our organization still takes resources to run, and we need your help running it. We used to raise over $200 per meeting when we would have these speaker events, and that income is gone. And so if you can make a donation to Atheists United or American Atheists or organizations in your local community that make this work possible, please, please, please make a gift today. These are going to be incredibly tough times for nonprofits. And so we need your support. We're looking for ways to give back to our communities, especially local atheists that are going to be impacted by not just COVID, but the crashing economy that comes with it. And so really want to emphasize supporting your local communities, not just through this crisis, but throughout time. If we want to actually be a force of good against the evils like the religious rights that have been influencing our national and local governments for a long time, we have to get organized and we have to stay organized. So again, please consider donation today. My dream is monthly donations. That's how you make me very happy. I will send you all the thank you cards. Please get on a monthly donation. Again, check out our upcoming events. We recently launched a food distribution program. We partnered with the LA Food Bank and are now doing a monthly food distribution. This past week, we handed out almost 100 families worth of groceries. It was a great program. We had 15 volunteers that showed up. This is our only in-person programming that we're planning is volunteer projects where we can give back. There's kind of a high risk reward. We are not asking you to participate if you feel like it's too high risk. But again, if you're able to support us with a donation, your time, or help spread the word around that program, we will love you forever. With that, I'm going to wrap the recorded part of the meeting. And for those that want to hang out and chat, we will hang out for at least another 20 minutes or so. Christine, our board president, will be here. I'll be here. And if Sam wants to hang out later, we'll also answer questions. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Sam, so much for joining us.